Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of these two guys. This is a pair of high-end screwdrivers, because apparently I review high-end screwdrivers now, from a company whose name, believe it or not, is Goodskrew, with a K for some damn reason. But anyways, these are two screwdrivers from Goodskrew. But first off, before we go any further, I gotta let you know that the Goodskrew folks reached out to me. They said, "Hey Nick, we see you review high-end screwdrivers." Okay, I guess I do. Would you be interested in checking out ours? After I did a triple take at the name, really? I told them, sure, but I sent them the disclaimer on my website, as always. I told them I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly, that it might be a gem, it might be junk. They did still send them along. Nonetheless, we do have to assume these are the very best quality-controlled screwdrivers ever, and I'm doing my absolute best not to let this affect the nature or the quality of my review. Next thing, let's do some size comparison. As always, here it is against the Spyderco Delica, and what we're going to see here is these are well, reasonably sized screwdrivers. Here they are against a standard ruler. And what we're going to see here is that in terms of overall length, we are right around 3 inches for the short version and right around 3.75-ish for the long version. And so there's that. And then up against a couple of other screwdrivers, here is the very common screwdriver that I use on my channel. This is from iFixit. They're a very basic aluminum screwdriver, like 10, 12 bucks or something like that. And what we see here is this is actually shorter than either of them, but I'm sorry, longer than either of these, but nonetheless, there's that. And then the one that started it all, so to speak, this is a high-end screwdriver that is a handmade screwdriver from Makar Knives and Tools over there, sold through Polish Custom Knives. And so what we see here is this is sort of right in the middle in terms of length between the two of them. So there is that. Next thing, there are two versions I've got for you on the table here. We have this one, which is Bleeding Unicorn, although they actually left out the R here, so it's Unicorn, which, okay, whatever. And then we have Ultimanium, which, I gotta be real, that's a good blend right there. But, so these guys, this is made of a titanium. You can see it is anodized on there, rather than this guy, which is made of a Damascus material, a pattern-welded Damascus of titanium, where everything is put together and then anodized differentially. So that's what we got going on here. And just so you know, let's get this part out of the way. The Bleeding Unicorn, the guy here is $100, and the Ultimanium version, the long one here, is $150. They've got a bunch of other different ones in different patterns, colors, whatever, even zirconium. And this is finally going to be a quick review because, dude, it's a screwdriver. So let's go on ahead and jump into what I'm liking, what I'm not liking so much. Okay, so on this good side, to start with, they've put a lot of effort into the unboxing and the marketing element of it. It's very clear that the marketing people are having fun. I mean, the unboxing experience is itself fine. It's just a big, it's a big paper box with some foam in it and whatnot. Screwdriver lives in there. But alongside that, they include a bunch of stuff. You get, like, stickers. You get the official collector card, because apparently people are officially collecting these. And you get a certificate of legitness. I kid you not, that's what it says, with a wax seal that says legit AF, as well as telling us that screwing is both caring and believing. That's with a K, of course. It's very clear that the marketers are having some fun with this, right? So at some level, okay, sure. And in a lot of ways, it's a little bit more fun than companies taking themselves way too seriously, which is common in the knife world. Okay, why not have some fun with it? Next thing, this is a lot of money for a screwdriver with a C, but at the same time, it's not all that crazy much in the way of money relative to some of the other high-end hobbies we're looking at here, right? It's ridiculous. 100%. You can get all the screwdriver you need with a C for like, $12, $13. Thing is, though, compared to the custom screwdriver with a C market, which is a thing, this feels very much like a bargain, right? That's a dumb thing to say, right? $150 for a screwdriver is not a bargain in a sane and rational world, but compared to a lot of the other options that previously you might needed to take to go with a full Damascus screwdriver, you could very easily be looking in the $500, $600, $700, $800 range, right? So these are very expensive at some level, but they're also much more affordable than a lot of the other ones in the space. I mean, mass production, and these are very clearly mass-produced, is one heck of a price reducer. And so in that way, this is going to be attainable to a lot of people who might like a fancy screwdriver. That might bring them some joy, but they might not be willing to plunk down, $800, $900 or way more to do one from a custom maker that is handmade. So there's that. Next thing, this guy has a good grip to it, right? Because you have this effectively frag pattern where you get these cuts on this side and then a little bit of other cutting here. I don't know that it's strictly a frag pattern, but at the same time, it looks a lot like it. What this means is that you do have a fair amount of grip on this guy. And if we take this guy and we put it up against a pocket knife here, and let's see here. Grab this guy with a T8 bit on this little Ruwaiki PE801 knife here. What we can see is it gives you plenty of gription. The other thing that's nice is that you have a nice wide grip on this guy. This is a pretty wide handle here. We are looking at right around 1.5 centimeters overall width here. And that gives you a fair amount of torque, right? Because as you're grabbing on, you want that extra bit of width. It makes it a little bit easier. Then the nice thing about it, too, is that it's running on a bearing here. And at some level, that's very nice for, well, frankly, fidgeting, right? It's a cute little fidget tool because it does spin for a good long while here. But the little bit of inertia that this spinner offers, I'm going to let it run out just because that's a part of the fidgeting for people. We're going to be here a little while. But the little bit of inertia that it offers when you start it spinning on the screw and then let it continue spinning freely, that can actually be useful for I touched it with my finger there. You can see this goes on for freaking ever. We're done here. But what you can do, actually, is once you get the screw kind of started, you can kind of just start twisting it and let it unscrew using that inertia itself. And that's actually a very nice thing, right? I did that way more than I needed to just for the purpose of demonstration here. But that little bit of extra inertia is nice for backing out a screw, especially one that has a lot of deep threading, where there's a lot of threads in there that you got to extract. This can be sort of a nice intermediary rather than doing, ding, 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 ding. And to be fair, something like this isn't bad particularly, right? Because it too has the little rotating cap. But that is one advantage to a relatively weighty driver with a relatively free spinning top there. That little bit of inertia can let you open something a little bit more quickly. So that can be very nice. And the long one, by the way, is a little bit nicer on the inertia front than the short one. Not because I think the materials are markedly different. It's just there's more of it spinning for the long one, so more inertia. Flywheels kind of work that way, right? Next thing, they have a bunch of different colorways for this. Like I said, this is Bleeding Unicorn and Ultimanium are the two kinds I have here, but they have a bunch of other ones with a series of equally weird names. But they also have them in like Zirconium, and I bet they're going to be coming out with more and more. They're just going to find metals and do these. You know what? That's going to be nice. And, there are different color patterns if this particular RGB aesthetic ain't doing it for you. I'm sure there's going to be something. So if you're looking for something like this, but you're like, neither of these are to my taste, check this site. They probably have something different for you. Next thing, they do have the two sizes here, and in a lot of ways, this is going to be nice. I can see people who might want something a little bit smaller, particularly if you have very, very small hands, or if you have relatively large hands, you're going to want something like this where you get a little bit more length in it. So I like that you've got two sizes here. I do kind of wish that there were a medium size, right? I want something that's kind of right in the middle. In a lot of ways, this Macar driver was kind of right in the sweet spot for me, because this guy sticks out a little bit far for me, and this guy is kind of, my fingers naturally want to be here. So I feel like I want something in the middle, but at the same time, it is nice that they give the option of two sizes for what appears to be pretty much all of their products. Then finally, on the good side, and the obvious thing, the reason why anybody does this is that these are attractive, right? If I kind of polish the Timascus up a little bit here, which makes it, all the more pretty, what we're going to see is that, it's pretty. Like, fundamentally, what you have here are different patterns of titanium over and over again. And we see that keeping throughout the entire thing. Patterns upon patterns upon patterns here. And because this is the two different kinds of titanium melded together, it's not that this is ever going to wear off, right? Could sand it and reflame it, and you would still end up with the same kind of pattern on there. That's a beautiful thing, right? If you are a fan of Timascus, more generally speaking, this kind of a titanium Damascus, then, this is going to be something that's attractive to you. And certainly, I think it's pretty cool looking. It's a nice little thing. The Unicorn Vomit one, or whatever it was, Bleeding Unicorn, is a little bit different. It's got a little bit more of a 90s aesthetic to it, but at the same time, it's kind of got a splash pattern anodization. It looks like that was probably actually lasered on if I were a betting man, but at the same time, still looks cool. But these are definitely going to be a little bit more attractive and certainly a lot more fancy than just sort of your plain, boring kind of screwdriver heads like you normally see out there in the world. So, to me at least, I think the aesthetics are going to be interesting. And frankly, if the aesthetics aren't interesting, then the screwdrivers aren't interesting to you. Sorry, screwdrivers with a K. I should have been more specific. Right? That's the only reason that you want to do these guys, right? So to me, all of that is the good, is that the aesthetic is kind of nice, especially, like, this is a very good view right here, right? The aesthetic is nice on this guy. It's got two different sizes, lots of colorways, materials, a very nice bearing with really good spin time and inertia for actually, unscrewing things quickly. The frag pattern offers relatively good grip. It is a lot of money for a screwdriver with a K, but it's also not a lot of money, and it's going to be attainable to a lot of people who want something a little ridiculous in their life, but they can't pay several $100s for it. And it comes with a whole bunch of weirdness, which shows a lot of personality. So on the bad side, to start with, Bleeding Unicorn. Really? Who are you, Voldemort? No. It's a dumb name. I'm sorry, absolutely not. You don't have to be that edgy. Next thing, I kind of want a medium one, right? This is an area where I felt like I was sort of right at that unhappy area. Because right here, this little bit of extra isn't necessary for me. If I'm actually screwing on something, generally speaking, my thumb and forefinger right here, this is just adding a little bit of extra distance, basically. And this guy feels a little too short because I kind of want to grab right about here. So I feel like if they were to do the tall one, but without this little extension, that would have been absolutely perfect for me. And in a lot of ways, like I said, I think the Macar really hits that sweet spot where the end of the bit is very close to your fingers here. Like, this is the right length for me. And so in practice, I feel like I'd like to see a medium version there, especially for those of us with slightly smaller hands. Next thing, I would like to see a stand included for this price point, right? This is a price point at which you need to be going every extra mile. And, they're talking about stands being available on the website, but I feel like that would be a nice thing. Just have a little stand that has a few of these, and that would encourage both collecting as well as give you a nice little place, a room for a few of these, that is, as well as giving you a nice little place to, put the driver. I think that would be a nice detail there, and especially at this kind of a price point, you really do need to go the extra miles. Next thing, the tops of the frag pattern here are a little bit smooth. I mean, if I kind of clean it off here, you're going to see that it is a polished sort of thing. And, you can even see the polish here, right? That is a polished surface. And polished surfaces are very good for looking pretty, but they're not so great for gripping. And very often I found my hand slipping a little bit until it kind of dug into one of these deeper cracks here. I'd like to see a little bit of a different texture up there. Maybe some kind of a knurling, some kind of a knurling situation like this, or maybe, like on the Macar here, we have a little bit more sharp edge on the inside there that made that easier. But this was definitely I could use a little more grip on the frag pattern here. I don't think it would hurt the aesthetic of it too much there. Next thing, the little top bits on both of these drivers had a tendency to loosen. When I first got it, I noticed that this would kind of come back itself loose. I hit this with a little bit of a blue Loctite on a stick here, just on the edge of the thread that threads into this, and it hasn't come loose since, but that is something I'd like to see them do from the factory. There's not really a reason to get up in there. Next thing, there is a little bit of a machining issue on this version here, on the Ultimanium. Take a look at this. So right here on their logo, and this is, let's see here, this is what their logo looks like, just for comparison here. This is what their logo is supposed to look like, and here's how it ends up showing up. And you know what? For the most part, it looks fine. It's recognizable. But at the same time, if we take a look here, we see that there are actually little tiny lines that go past. Like you can see, they align exactly with where it goes, but basically it feels like they didn't pull the tool up high enough again after they finished this horizontal pass, and so you end up with all these extra lines, effectively blurring the logo out a little bit. I mean, it's still clear that it is the logo, but for $150 for something like this, you kind of need to be getting all the details right, and that's a detail that they do not have right. On the other side here is a character. I don't know exactly what that character means. If you happen to want, I mean, it's a pie with a dot, for the lack of a better term. But, if you happen to understand what that means, do let me know down in the comments there. But nonetheless, that one's fine, but this particular area, that's not great. It's worth noting, though, that is not a problem on the other version of it here. That is that one's done fine. And actually, frankly, it's done just much better. It's a little bit more recognizable, etc. So that's a little tiny detail. Oh my God, is it a little tiny detail? But it's a little tiny detail they need to get right at this price. And then finally, on the bad side, the bits that came with this are freaking dumb. This is the bit kit that came with this set of screwdrivers. In this set right now for the review, I'm using a set of Weehaw bits. Weehaw generally makes very nice, screwdriver bits. There are other companies that do too, like Wera, etc. But they chose this set, and this set is from the illustrious company known as Broppy. Broppy is a company that I was only able to find reference to on Amazon, and this, in fact, feels like a company name that exists solely because that's not something someone had registered on Amazon yet. But there were a couple of issues with your Broppy bits here, the least of which is that you have trouble getting it out of the damn holder. But like, for instance, this Phillips screw head is not actually true. Right? If you start to spin it around, it wobbles a little bit relative to the base. Like this part, the bit itself is slightly bent in this direction. So as you put it in the driver and you spin it up, it actually does wobble a little tiny bit. It makes the whole driver a little bit off balance. Is it the end of the world? No, absolutely not. But at the same time, you're putting all this effort into a driver and then you screw that up? No, not really. And then similarly, also, the flathead driver, it may be a little difficult to see here, but it is actually rounded. It is higher in the center than to either side. They have made a non-flat flathead driver. On top of that, these are just gigantic and huge bits, right? I mean, this kind of thing, really? Like, is this the aesthetic you're going for here? It genuinely feels like they didn't even think about what they were shipping with the kit, right? Because this looks actually reasonably attractive, right? The bit is the only part that's not beautiful and fancy. This is just like, I'm a screwdriver. And it just doesn't make any freaking sense, right? It's like they shipped these off and said, oh, throw some bits in the box, and somebody looked at the cheapest thing on Amazon and did that. This is sort of a nice example of when including an extra item with the purchase can make your product worse rather than better. I mean, in what universe did they look at Goodskrew and go, hey, let's ship it with bad bit? This is just bad, and there's not even any Torx in there, which really, guys, that's kind of important these days. So to me, this set of bits is kind of embarrassing, right? I think the product would have been slightly better shipped without these, or shipped with a very basic, heck, even had they done a set of bits from Broppy that were properly sized, that would have been something. But in practice, this was a really bad choice, and makes, I hope desperately that they are reevaluating their relationship, both with Broppy as well as with, that size bit, generally speaking. At this kind of a price point, absolutely not. If you're going to ship bits, ship good bits. Ship like Weehaw, Wera, something like that. And if you're not going to do that, at least don't ship bits, right? Don't ship bad bits from Goodscrews. That's with a K, of course. So let's go ahead and review the bad. The included bits are just kind of a disgrace. There is some over-machining on the Ultanium version. The top portion had a little tendency to loosen. The tops of the frag pattern, little smooth. Like to see a stand included at this price point. I kind of want a medium version of this. And the Bleeding Unicorn is just a really dumb, edgy name. Final conclusion, this is a set of fancy screwdrivers for sure, with a fancy bunch of marketing here, a price that makes fancy a little bit more obtainable to some folks, a relatively grippy pattern on there, a good inertia for spinning things out, nice bearings for fidgeting, two sizes, lots of options, and a very attractive look if you're a big fan of Timascus. On the bad side, you're missing that medium size. There really should be a stand here. The tops of the frag pattern need a little bit more texture. The top bit did loosen some. The machining, it could use a little work in places. More specifically, one place. And it shipped with these, which, guys, absolutely not. But ultimately, I kind of feel like these are both neat and needless, right? This is the same kind of argument I had in my last review of a fancy high-end screwdriver, right? You are buying an aesthetic improvement here rather than a functional improvement. You are paying for a driver that looks a little bit nicer than your average driver, right? This is the driver that I generally use on the channel, right? From iFixit, if you're curious about this, nickshabazz.com/tools. But nonetheless, this is the driver that I will usually use on the channel. And you know what? This works great. There's very little problem with these little guys right here. So does this. Aside from having that little bit of extra inertia to it for quickly unscrewing a screw, there is really not much that these do better than your average screwdriver with a C, right? They are absolutely fine, but at no point in time, since I've had these on my table and used these, have I felt like I really wish I was using the good screwdriver right now. Sorry, with a K. I really wish I was doing that because honestly, they're fine. They're cool looking, but they're not going to make your work any easier. They're not going to make it any different. They're just going to make it look a little more stylish. Thing is, though, that's a goal for some. I've got a whole video about the difference between art and tool, as, talked about by a really high-end handmade $800 screwdriver, right? This is way more intricate. Obviously, this guy is a way more intricate version of things, right? And it is handmade, so it's a very different sort of affair. But in a lot of ways, it actually comes across as a little bit less fancy than this little guy right here, where the materials themselves are a little bit more crazy, right? It's a different sort of situation. It's a different aesthetic. In a lot of ways, this guy right here, the Goodskrew, gives you the opportunity for an equivalent level of fanciness, but at a much, much lower price point, right? It's a price point that isn't quite so exotic. And so you've kind of traded the handmade for the much more mass-produced, but you've also kept $600 in your wallet, so that's probably a fair trade for a lot of people. Ultimately, though, like I said, this is fanciness and art for the sake of fanciness and art. You are paying very, very good money for the process here. Whether that makes sense to you or not, I really can't say. For a lot of people, this is going to be like, Nick, you are an idiot. Why on earth would you pay that? Watch my original video for a discussion of why that's a perfectly valid take, but maybe not the only one out there in the world. And for most people, something like this is going to work just absolutely freaking fine. You are buying fanciness and art, and you are paying good money for that process. I don't know, but it's up for you. Ultimately, well, I think many people need a good screw with a C from time to time. I don't think most people need a good screw with a K, right? But if they do, if you are feeling desperately like you need a good screw in that particular sense, well, according to the company, you should go screw yourself. Nice. So anyways, hope this has been interesting. Have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of the day, and I hope you didn't feel too screwed by this review. Bye now.